Avtar Meher Baba Ki Jai. Ashok ji, we can start with the three messages of Hafiz.
Avatar Meher Baba ki Jai. Three of Meher Baba's favorite couplets of Hafiz, a mystical Persian poet, befitting a fortunate slave, carry out every command of the master without any question of why and what. About what you hear from the master, never say it is wrong, because, my dear, the fault lies in your own incapacity to understand him. I am slave of the master who has released me from ignorance. Whatever my master does is of the highest benefit to all concerned. Hafiz. Avtar Meher Baba ki Jai.
Right.
Thank you, Karthik.
Meher Baba Ki Jai. Thank you so much. And welcome back to the God Speaks reading. So we will be focusing on part two today, or rather continuing from part two where we left last time. So it was a very nice session in the last discussion. We understood the linkages between impressions, the idea of the whim. We went and read beams. Then we came back and explored the concept and meaning of the word consciousness against the topic of sanskaras, against the topic of experiences, right? So there were many words that Baba uses experiences, consciousness, sanskaras, and expression of sanskaras. So all of these concepts were explored in the 2-3 pages that we read last time, but it was a beautiful read. So we are continuing from that point on. Any opening comments before we start?
No.
Okay. Avtar Meher Baba Ki Jai. So I will start on page 12, so those of you on the physical book. Therefore, in order to experience the impressions of the most first species of stone form dropped, the consciousness of the soul, centered in the impressions of the dropped stone form, begins to associate with the most next species of stone form. The soul identifies itself with this species of stone, and the consciousness of the soul begins to experience through association with the new medium of the most next species of stone form, the impressions of the most first species of stone form. So you go from the pre-stone to the stone, and in the stone, there is a series of species that you associate and identify. Again, that's another keyword or key phrase that Baba uses. So first you yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Yes, I just wanted to highlight it's the most first species of stone form dropped.
Yes, no, first stone form dropped, yes, which goes to the most next. So again, though it is confusing, various authors and specialists have underlined that Baba's emphasis on the word most and most next are more to make it clear that there are many, and that the very next could be different from the very last, and so on and so forth. So it's more for emphasis and style that this language has been chosen. So making a broader point. Okay, let's continue. The most important point to be understood here is that when the consciousness of the soul disassociates its identifications from one form or medium and retains only the impressions of the form so disassociated, these impressions are experienced through another appropriate medium when the consciousness of the soul associates with the next medium or form. But this next medium or form is always created and molded of the consolidated impressions of the last species of form with which the soul associated and identified itself, and which impressions were retained by the consciousness of the soul, even when the disassociated, even when disassociated from the form. So the impressions drive everything. The impressions which remain at the end of a disassociation from a form determine the nature of the next form that one is going to associate and identify with. What determines the nature of the impressions that survive? And the impressions is retained in the mental body of the consciousness of the soul. Continue. Thus, innumerable, diverse experiences of countless impressions experienced by the consciousness of the soul through diverse species of stone forms, one after the other, lead to the greater evolution of consciousness of the soul. Till evolution of the consciousness of the soul. Ultimately, a stage is reached after ages and cycles of experiences where the consciousness of the soul has a tendency to disassociate the soul even from the most last species of the stone form. And although the most last species of stone form is disassociated or dropped by the soul, the most finite consciousness evolved thus far remains together with the most finite gross impressions of the most last species of stone form drop. The soul, now without any medium or form, is conscious of the most finite gross impressions, sanskaras, of the most last species of stone form. The soul must necessarily experience these impressions. Now, in order to experience the impressions of the most last stone form, the soul associates and identifies with another medium, metal form. This medium of metal form is but the mold of the impressions of the most last species of stone form. In other words, the most first species of metal form is created and molded of the most last species of stone form impressions. It is thus that the infinite, eternal soul without form, which is eternally in the oversoul, experiences through evolved consciousness the most gross, finite impressions of the most last species of stone form while associating and identifying itself with the most first species of metal form. It's a beautiful uh, paragraph. I would love to read it again. So basically, he now again underlines that all this is not just the consciousness of the drop soul that we're dealing with. It's actually the oversoul, right? So let me reread this paragraph. It is thus that the infinite, eternal soul without form, which is eternally in the oversoul being in capital, experiences through evolved consciousness the most gross finite impressions of the most last species of stone form while associating and identifying itself with the most first species of metal form. There are diverse species of metal form, just as there are of stone form. And the consciousness of the soul utilizes these diverse, innumerable species of metal form as media through which to experience the diverse and innumerable impressions gathered. Thus, the evolution of the consciousness of the soul gains and gathers momentum in proportion to the diverse and multiple experiences of varied and innumerable impressions through different media or species of forms. I think another good phrase. So, as the journey progresses, there is momentum that goes on increasing. Momentum is also characterized by the evolution of the consciousness, right? And the momentum seems to suggest that there is something more than what meets the eye. What do I mean by that? I'm trying to suggest that if there is impressions, I mean, it's like synergy, right? So when you add two things, you get more. So in that same way, you keep increasing and it gets more and more momentum, right? Okay, let me continue. This is how the cycles of evolution of consciousness of the soul go on evolving further and greater consciousness with evolution of forms of higher and higher species while experiencing and exhausting the impressions of the dissociated forms of the lower species. The consciousness of the soul experiences and exhausts all the impressions of the most last species of stone form through the medium of the most first species of metal form. When all the impressions of the most last species of stone form are exhausted, the consciousness of the soul disassociates itself from the most first species of metal form and drops that form. But the consciousness now retains the impressions of the most first species of the metal form. There's an asterisk. Okay, so this is what I was already referring to. Let's read it. The reader should not think the oft appearing mosts, such as most first, most next, most finite, are superfluous or redundant, because each species of a certain form, kingdom, stone, for instance, has numerous repetitions with slight variations before going on to the most next species of that same form. And it seemed necessary to differentiate. Most last is used to mean the form most recently encountered, that is, the highest and latest evolutionary form of the species, and should not be construed as the form furthest down the scale. Okay. Last can seem to suggest that it's lower down. It's not. It's the last, both in a time sequence and in the evolution of consciousness and the evolution of the last associated form in that kingdom. Last, it's more time series. That's it. Okay, let's go back. These impressions of the most first species of the metal form are now experienced by the conscious soul through its association and identification with the most next species of metal form. This form is but the consolidated mold of the impression of the most first species of metal form, which was dropped or disassociated by the conscious soul. A chain of varied species of metal forms is thus created, and the soul, or to be more precise, the consciousness of the soul, associates with and disassociates from every species of the metal form, exhausting and gaining diverse impressions. While experiencing these impressions, the soul evolves more and more consciousness simultaneously with the evolution of the higher and higher species of forms. After ages and cycles, at last the consciousness of the soul associates and identifies itself with the most last but one species of metal form that the soul has just dropped or dissociated. The soul, eternally in the oversoul, though being infinite and without form, finds itself as metal. While identifying itself with diverse species of metal form, the soul begins to experience simultaneously the gross world in accordance with and in proportion to the soul's experiences of the stone form and the metal form. So, the in accordance with and in proportion to is a suggestion to the limited experiences as permitted by the impressions and the form, right? So at this stage, the only two things that this consciousness of the soul can experience is impressions linked to the stone form and impressions and experiences linked to the metal form, right? Well, take a pause here. Any thoughts? Any questions?
Jay Baba, a very a basic thought that we have a relay race wherein we pass on the baton. So the change of form is like passing on the baton, if I may say. The impressions, of course, this is much more serious and much more uh, you know intricate than what I am saying. But a way of understanding for people who are new to God Speaks would be that, like the change of consciousness of the soul passes through different diverse forms. So it's from stone to metal. It's earlier the gas to stone to metal. So, there is a beautiful diagram in Sufism reoriented in Berkeley, where they have tried to, depict this, and it's a very important part of the evolution, because normally we follow Darwin and the evolution of different forms, but the consciousness of the soul is the first time that we are exposed to. Jai Baba.
Yeah. So
Jay
I'll
Baba,
just, yeah, please go ahead, Norm.
what came to my head is, like for humans, we see that there are seven, what are those called? Stages to,
Kingdoms, yeah.
yeah. So it looks like it's the same for the stones also. There's incremental improvement as they go along in evolution. I didn't know that. I mean, I thought you are stone, then you go to the next stage. Stone also has to take a lot of, I don't know what to call it, incarnations in that sense, to be able to go to the second stage. So, reaching human form, we must have gone through a whole lot of changes within us. So, that's something also to be grateful for. At stone stage, we've gone through so much, little, little, little. And now we are at human stage. So, it can um, you know, I was wondering those 700 plus janmas which Baba talks about. Is it only human births or it includes evolution on various stages like stone, plants, those kind of things? If anybody has
Okay.
any, yeah. Thank you, Jai
I
Okay.
Baba.
think pre-human is 84 lakhs. Is that understanding correct?
Correct. 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 Correct.
Pre-human is
So,
84 lakhs. And after that, it is up to you probably that how much effort
yes.
the individual makes. Yeah.
So there are
Good
two
news
Jai
is we
Baba.
have
numbers.
done those 4 lakhs.
Yeah, yeah.
There are
Um,
two numbers here. Yeah, go ahead, Kama.
it's 50 crore species,
Exactly.
basically, which includes the 84 lakh human life forms for moksha.
The
Jai Baba.
the bigger number is 50 crore. So I mean,
So
if you look at it from a
that's done and
time
dusted.
standpoint, yeah, if you look at it from a time standpoint, it's mind-boggling. But I take uh, comfort, like Norm said, from the fact that, whoa, this is what we have been through already, right? And when I say we as the individualized consciousness of the soul as individuals, right? As the consciousness of the Kartik soul, consciousness of the Ashok soul, right? And that's where I think I wanted to interrupt also and comment on Ashok's analogy. The danger with analogy is we have to be very clear. We have to remember that what's being passed is the impressions. Ashok is not the runner, right? Ashok is not the runner. So in the analogy of your baton and the runner, please be aware that what is being passed is the so what's moving, what's changing hands. What's changing hands is the consciousness of the soul and the impressions with it. And the runners can represent the forms, the life experiences. I mean, the forms alone, not even the life experiences. Right. So just a quick comment because it can get confusing, specifically with the analogy, because we may be thinking we are the runner. No, we are not the runner. Right. Just anyway, that's any
And
other thoughts?
Jai Baba, just a
Yeah.
little digression. The sanskaras get woven around what? The soul or the mind? What transfers them to the next stage or the next janma?
Okay. The technical answer is it's the mental body. The mental body is the repository of that's what holds the sanskaras. General answer is it goes with the soul. Specifically, the soul, the consciousness of the soul has three bodies: the gross, subtle, and mental. The mental body carries the sanskaras. The subtle body does not have impression. I mean, subtle impressions are not to be confused with that. The impressions or the sanskaras are carried by the mental body from form to form. That's the technical answer. So basically, it's not mind in general, but mental body to be specific. Is that
Jai
any
Baba.
other thoughts on that question? Any other interpretations?
Well, the other thing is that this sanskaric impressions that are going on from form to form, species to species, kingdom to kingdom, that is the term is winding sanskaras. So what is happening here is the sanskaras are becoming more and more dense as you go to higher and higher forms, stone to metal, metal to worm, and so on. So it's programmed. So we know that each species is already programmed in terms of its form, quality, whatever impressions that you're going to gather. So consciousness to evolve to become full and complete in the human form has to experience all these different impressions which are gathered in the previous form, which we call as winding sanskaras. So that term winding sanskaras is applicable here during the evolutionary cycle. There is no spending sanskaras, there is no unwinding sanskaras. It is programmed. So the consciousness of the soul, all of us, the point here is that the saying that take this human form very precious, because imagine having gone through 50 crores minus 84 lakh whatever species, that this soul consciousness has now come into the human form. Now our job is to look for liberation, which is the whole purpose of creation, right? So that's another way of also looking at it, you know. Jai Baba.
I have a question
Thank
follow up on your comment, Tama. So the stone does not have any experiences, or so when you say it only does winding of sanskaras, so the subhuman kingdoms, all the kingdoms. So what motivates the the collection of impressions? So if you don't have experiences, you can't collect newer impressions, correct? So I mean, I'm struggling with what you said now, where you said it's just winding, and hence you just get more and more sanskaras. Can you clarify that, please?
Correct. I think if I rephrase that question, it is we are asking how come an inanimate body, inanimate form, vis-a-vis an animate form. An animate form is something that procreates, that can replicate itself, whereas a stone or metal is basically the way it is. So the question here is, how come consciousness in an inanimate form like stone or metal is able to experience impressions? Correct? So
Uh,
the
y- yeah, no, that fight is another fight. I think that we are all resolved. Most of us are, in the sense that it's very, very feeble, right? So the consciousness exists, but it's very feeble, and I don't want to use the word latent because it's not latent. It's actually alive. It's active. It's active, but very feeble. The consciousness that exists in the human is the max, but the stone also has consciousness. It's very feeble and uh, it's like a weak battery or a weak network, right? The consciousness is very, very low is what I understood. But what does the soul when it gets an impression, what happens in that soul? So
See, the
yeah.
impressions have to be experienced. See,
Hmm.
impressions just don't like there. So the impressions are being see only when the consciousness of the soul experiences the impressions, which we called, in human form as pending sanskaras, then it's able to kind of, so it has to experience these, uh, winding sanskaras, which are very mechanical and unique to a particular form, whether you can call it as a chemical reaction or whatever kind of experience. Okay, that is a subject that, that one can analyze. So we only have to assume here that the consciousness, to evolve itself in the big picture, has to go through all these different higher and higher forms, because these forms have higher and higher, what do you call, like the consciousness increases when you take higher and higher forms. So the
Yes.
the soul
Yeah.
consciousness needs to go through these forms to come to the ultimate form, which is the human form. That is how I understand. I don't
Correct.
know whether I answered the question.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
I think the subtle part of the question was, uh, suppose there is a stone, what new impressions does it gain? It's just lying somewhere. Like humans, we do
Yes.
so many actions
Thank you.
and then gain impressions. That was the subtle part. I think even if it is lying in a jungle in a remote place, you always have impressions of sun and rain falling on it,
Yes.
or
The five
climatic
elements.
changes are happening,
Right.
and it
Correct.
may roll. Stone may roll in case there is a vibration
Right.
on the earth. All those things are there. A bird
Correct.
may spit or sit on it or whatever. Something would happen to that stone, so that those impressions would it gain it probably. We are assuming that each change of form is like our human life, but it could be very
Yeah.
quick, very quick. Sometimes it may, I don't know. We can't put,
So,
but there is no life in that part. Just change from
see,
one form to another
when you
and
look
gain
at
those
the
impressions. Yeah.
when you compare the chronological age of mountains and stones and rocks, they are so long, meaning millions of years. Like the Himalayas are the basically the youngest mountains in the world, whereas the one in Tiruvannamalai, the Arunachala hill, is supposed to have been there since creation, meaning when the earth was formed. That is geologically
Mm.
found.
Wow.
So the fact of the matter is, space and time have no meaning when you look at the big picture of the
Yes.
cosmos and creation. It is only in our
Mhm.
waking state. Remember, only in our waking state that space time make an impression. When you're in sound sleep state, you are in the divine absolute vacuum state. When you're dreaming in your sleep, you are in a different subtle form. So, space time is something that we need to understand is only applicable in the waking state, because it doesn't exist in the big picture as such. It's just a symbolic way of understanding, you know, uh, whatever is going on these processes. So, hey, Baba.
Correct. So also the complicated thing from an imagination perspective or our limited imagination perspective is the fact of what happens or the when. Again, very with due respect to what Kama just said. don't bother too much about the concept of time because it's very difficult to comprehend it in the context of how when. So like, I'm sure after this call, maybe we may get questions like, when do you think I would have been a stone? Right? It's a logical question. You buy into this whole argument. Yeah, the next obvious question you're going to say is, okay, when was I stoned? Now, if you do that arithmetic, it's too complex, and quite honestly, it's irrelevant, like Kama said. But I had a more subtler and more intriguing question. So, what is the point at which? So one stone becomes another stone, right? So, but we also know Newtonian physics that you can't just destroy stone completely, right? You can have an earthquake, but it can crush the stone. You can't make another stone, or it. So that's something that's still not very clear. So I hope my question is making sense. So one species of stone, how does it how does the consciousness of the soul disassociate from that and go to another species of
Yeah.
stone?
So there is, yeah, Karthik, I don't think in this process there is a dissolution of forms necessary for
So it's
evolution
just
of consciousness.
association and dissociation.
Yeah, so there is no that stone has to break into something and then only it can go. Consciousness has moved on. It's like sitting on a form and then moves on like a bird to the another form. That's my understanding.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
that's a lot more
Yeah,
logical from an understanding perspective. So
right,
the
right.
consciousness of the soul, and if you read it verbatim, that your understanding is perfect, right? So you associate and identify, and then you disassociate and identify with another stone,
Yes,
right? So
yes. That's what it
yeah,
is.
so yeah, I think bingo.
Jay
So
Baba,
yeah.
another thing that we want to also look at is where did this all come from? The stones and the plants and the animals. So we have to go right to the root of the, the process of creation. So, which is basically the whim, the most original whim. And the interesting paradox here is this most original whim came from the divine imagination of God when he woke up, the so called Paratpar Parabrahma state, went into the Paramatma waking state, right? It's like a baby in the womb. For me, the Paratpar Parabrahma sound sleep state, where you're unconscious, is like the baby in the womb. And then the Paramatma state is like when the baby gets born after 9 months and says, who am I? What's going on? Right. And then you go through these 7 stages of life, every 12 years till 84. So the interesting thing is that all of this is coming from the divine imagination, from nothingness. So, of course, according to physics, the whole universe was at a trillion degrees centigrade when the Big Bang happened. And you also have to know that our own solar system, which is like 4.5 billion years, the sun is a third generation star because this cosmos is 13.8 billion years. So our sun itself went through three iterations and cooled down. Basically, it happens during the supernova. And then everything started to cool down. You have gas and dust in the universe, and then it starts like gas becomes liquid, then liquid becomes solid, stuff like that. So that's another interesting thing to look at to understand mind. These things have come out of nothingness, basically. Okay, Baba.
Mm. Yeah, I think that is a good clarification. Thank you. Great. So let's continue. Um, Start from here. The metal form, which includes a series of diverse species of metal, is as inorganic, inanimate, and solid as the stone form, which includes a series of diverse species of stone. The soul, or more precisely, the consciousness of the soul, while identifying itself with the species of stone and metal forms, finds itself as one with the stone or metal form and thus realizes itself as inorganic, inanimate, and solid, and experiences these inorganic, inanimate, and solid states throughout the entire evolution of the stone and metal forms in the gross world. The solid, inanimate state of the soul is one in which life and energy are still dormant in spite of greater evolution of consciousness. Hence, the forms in this solid state cannot of their own accord move about by themselves. That is, they cannot have voluntary motion. And therefore, the consciousness of the soul associating with these solid forms, which are inanimate and inorganic, and with life and energy still dormant in them, tends to assert recumbent horizontal positions rather than to assert vertical upright stands or erect positions in the gross world. After ages and cycles of varied, innumerable gross experiences of diverse and innumerable impressions through a variety of species of metal forms, the consciousness of the soul eventually disassociates itself from the most last species of metal form. Thus, the identity of the soul with the most last species of metal form is dropped, and as usual, the conscious soul now is once again temporarily unidentified with any form. That is, the soul is now without any form. In this state of the conscious soul, when there is no form with which to be associated, the consciousness of the soul is centered only in the impressions of the most last species of metal form, which has now been dropped. Thus, the conscious soul, in this state of having no form for identification, is conscious only of the impressions of the most last species of metal form. Conscious soul must exhaust these impressions of the most last species of the metal form by the consciousness of the soul experiencing these impressions through some appropriate medium. The appropriate medium to spend or exhaust these impressions of the most last species of metal form is the most first species of vegetable form. This species of vegetable form is nothing but the consolidated mold of the impressions of the most last species of the metal form. I just quickly I'll pause here. Any comments? Yeah.
Only comment is when we say that when we were monkeys or when we were trees or stone, I think it is better phrase would be when our soul associated itself with
Identified.
these forms. Yeah. So that's the one.
Associated and
Not
identified,
it is
yes.
not a physical evolution of forms. When we say that we were stone and bird and monk animals, that probably underlying theme is that we evolved from in physical form from them. But it is just the association of consciousness, a previous consciousness, or uh, you know uh, uh, the earlier consciousness of us associated with those forms. Like in human forms, our consciousness was limited when we were in kindergarten. It's like that.
Very true. I'm trying to get the diagram from uh, uh, different lectures, or is it creation and its causes, where this cycle of the recumbent and the standing form is described by Baba. It's not there in God Speaks. I'm sure you guys might have seen this diagram.
What is the question? What is the question? Actual question?
Oh, there's no
Topic you are
question.
thinking about?
I just took a pause to try to
Okay.
find the diagram that is in creation and its causes, where the two the two flips of the recumbent position of recumbent to standing through the kingdoms is explained diagrammatically. I'll find it and post it. You know what I'm talking about, right? So in
Yeah.
the stone form, you're lying down, and then you stand up
Yeah.
in the as the tree, and then you finally come to the human form where you're standing up again. Because as an animal, you're again recumbent, right?
Yeah.
So
Hmm.
horizontal, vertical, and then finally as human, vertical. Anyway, I'll
Yeah.
share that on the group, the diagram. That's what is being talked about in the previous paragraph here. Yeah, right. So let's continue. Um, The conscious soul, yeah, wait, this one. When the consciousness of the soul associates now with the most first species of vegetable form, the soul, thus conscious, tends to identify itself with that form and actually finds itself as that species of vegetable form, quite oblivious of the reality that it, soul, is infinite, eternal, and without form, eternally in the oversoul, Paramatma. In this state of the most first species of the vegetable form, the consciousness of the soul experiences the gross world in accordance with and in proportion to the impressions it experienced and experiences of the stone forms, metal forms, and vegetable form, respectively. While thus experiencing the gross world, this consciousness of the soul, identified with the vegetable form, realizes now that it is vegetable and has half inanimate and half animate attributes. The conscious soul now asserts in the gross world through this vegetable form an upright, erect stand. Although this cannot stand independently by itself, it uses the support of other media to assert an upright stand. This form is still not capable, however, of giving the experience of voluntary movement to the consciousness of the soul. After the impressions of the last most species of the metal form are exhausted by the consciousness of the soul through the most first species of vegetable form, this most first species of vegetable form is dropped. That is, the consciousness of the soul disassociates itself from this most first species of vegetable form. Again, the conscious soul realizes that it is without a form, although the evolved consciousness is there. This evolved consciousness of the soul is now centered in the impressions of the most first species of the vegetable form just dropped or disassociated. To experience these impressions of the most first species of vegetable form, the consciousness of the soul, now without any form, utilizes an appropriate medium, which is the most next species of the vegetable form. This most next species of the vegetable form is nothing but the consolidated mold of the impressions of the most first species of vegetable form. By association with the medium of the most next species of vegetable form, the consciousness of the soul experiences in the gross world the impressions of that last species of the vegetable form just dropped. When these impressions are exhausted through diverse experiences, the consciousness of the soul relinquishes its association with the most next species of vegetable form and again experiences that it, the soul, is without gross form and that its consciousness is centered only in the impressions of that species of form last dropped. Again, to
Yeah,
experience
Jai Baba.
these impressions, yeah, come on.
The question here is, can we understand that the impressions of each form that is being experienced, that is the impressions of the prior form, is being experienced in the next form? So, are these impressions qualities and attributes of that particular form? That's my question. Jai Baba.
What is a quality and an attribute?
Quality meaning like a rose is a rose, it has thorn, it smells, it has a certain thing. A vegetable has a certain quality about it, essence about it. The properties, what I would call the best word to use, properties. Each form has a property. So, can we understand that these impressions of each form that Baba is discussing in God Speaks, that is being experienced in the next form, are they, can we think of them as properties that are being experienced, or what it is? That's just a academic question, yeah, Baba.
A
Rather than
good,
just
good question. I was toying with the word faculty, right? So the faculties are improving from kingdom and species to species within a kingdom, but the faculties are not the impressions. the the experiences provided by that faculty. So the rose has a soft petal, has a sharp thorn. Those are faculties of the rose. The smell and the touch of humans and animals it receives are the experiences that those faculties enable it to receive, and those are the impressions. That's the way I would understand it. What do you think, Kama?
Mm, yeah, very well said. I think that makes a lot of sense.
Right?
Like,
So
yeah.
yeah, so the form
Oh,
provides certain things which offers certain unique experiences, and those unique experiences are the impressions.
yeah, this is only part of it. I mean, because any species will also interact with the external world. So
Mhm.
even those impressions would be also there of its own, what is its own latent nature, like smell and sharpness of a thumb. Yes, it is there, but it is also the interaction with the other forms, right? If I'm a sheep and get killed by a lion or a tiger, so that also
Yeah,
is impressions, right?
absolutely.
Yeah, just wanted to add that. Yeah.
Yeah,
So we
even
are
in the
So
saying
rose
that the
example,
interaction.
even in yeah, go ahead, Kama. After you.
No, no, sorry. I was saying that what you guys are saying is the interaction that that particular species or form has with its
yes,
environment creates the impressions.
yeah, that's
Okay.
also
So,
there. Yeah, I
right.
have an
Okay.
impression that I have so much of wool on my body which is get shaven or doesn't get shaven. That's also an impression. I'm giving example of a sheep, but if I am getting attacked, even not even killed, even attacked, and I am in a fearful situation that I have to protect my life, that's also an impression. So everything I do is an impression as a sheep, yeah, or get done. I mean,
I
I
think I
do or
agree with
get done.
Sanjay.
Yeah, yeah,
I agree with Sanjay. Everything an entity has only impressions, nothing else.
Yes.
You may call it physical
Gross,
properties
subtle,
or
mental, yeah.
yeah, subtle. No, in a visible form, the subtlety is very
Very,
small,
yeah, correct.
very feeble. Most of them are gross. Yeah, everything is gross. Yeah, yeah. They
I
slowly
think
develop, I think, they slowly evolve into, let's take a rose with a good smelling rose. There are roses which don't smell. In America, roses don't smell. In India, roses smell. There may be some evolution from the basic non-smelling to the smelling rose. So there is also some sanskara slowly developed. Maybe in one species it slightly smells, and later on it develops that smell, strong smell. Just an example. Yeah, Baba.
yeah, but there's a deeper question that I think we have addressed collectively here, and let me state that, and let's see if we all agree to it. So, is an impression always response to stimuli? So, what Kama said, and then all of us agreed, is the word interaction. What is interaction? Interaction is a response. Response to what? Response to a stimuli. So, as in any kingdom, the impression is always a response to stimuli. And I think if you if you think deeply, that's absolutely true. So if you go to the beyond, there is no stimuli. There is nothing. And there's no response. So in everything after that point, this response to stimuli is what is creating the impressions. Is that a way to summarize?
Yes, yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Jay Baba,
Okay.
I
Yeah.
was just doing cloud GPAT on. I asked the question, do plants evolve consciousness?
Mhm.
And it says that from what we currently understand, plants have not evolved consciousness in the way humans and many animals have. However, plants do possess sophisticated sensory and response systems that can sometimes appear consciousness like. which we know. Yes, it is. Plants, number one, plants can sense and respond to their environment through various mechanisms. They detect light, gravity, touch, and chemical signals. They adjust growth patterns based on environmental conditions. They communicate with other plants through chemical signals. They can mount defensive responses to threats. The question of plant consciousness is complicated by how we define consciousness itself.
Exactly.
Most scientific definition of consciousness include features like subjective first person experience, self awareness, integration of information, the ability to model the self and environment. Plants lack the neural architecture that we typically associate with consciousness in animals. They don't have neurons or a central nervous system. Instead, they use different cellular signaling mechanisms to process information and respond to their environment. However, some researchers like Stefano have proposed the concept of plant intelligence, arguing that plants exhibit complex adaptive behaviors that deserve recognition as a different kind of intelligence, even if it's not consciousness as we understand it. So, my question, my thing to extrapolate this is there have been studies which you probably know that when you talk to plants, they actually respond. When you talk to them
Oh yeah.
kindly, they grow. So I think that we are very clear based on Baba's literature that it is all about consciousness comes first before even the form, correct? That is how it works because we know now by reading God Speaks, it's consciousness and sanskaras that creates this whole evolution, evolution of consciousness through different forms. So anyway, Jai Baba.
I mean, thanks for that note. But again, all of it is linked or determined by the definition of the word consciousness. And whatever that Professor Stefano did, he used an alternate word. He used the word intelligence, right? They're all not absolutely synonymous and surely not synonymous in the Baba context. In the Baba context, consciousness is what you said, which is, uh, what is not there in Beyond the Beyond that we know. Now we don't know, so we have to use a neti process to define consciousness, right? So we'll have to progressively determine what consciousness is. So what is not there is we are sure of in the Beyond state. Anyway, good discussion. Let's continue. I stopped somewhere in between. So let me start back by from the beginning of this paragraph. By association with the medium of the most next species of vegetable form, the consciousness of the soul experiences in the gross world the impressions of that last species of the vegetable form just dropped. When these impressions are exhausted through diverse experiences, the consciousness of the soul relinquishes its association with the most next species of vegetable form and again experiences that it, the soul, is without gross form and that its consciousness is centered only in the impressions of that species of form last dropped. Again, to experience these impressions, the consciousness of the soul tends the soul to identify with the next species of vegetable form. This chain of impressions, experiences, and species of form from one form to another is so linked that it is apparently endless. And the consciousness of the soul, in order to evolve itself fully and completely, has no other course but to become entangled in this vicious circle until, perforce, the consciousness of the soul thus gained makes the soul realize that it is infinite, eternal, and eternally in the oversoul, and makes the soul experience infinite power, knowledge, and bliss. Okay, to I have one again. The nature of the mind is to think and question. So I have a question for you, Sanjay. So if we are just going to, as a consciousness of a stone soul that went through a metal soul, now it wants to experience vegetable experiences. It goes and finds a plant and identifies and associates with it. Now, the question that came to my mind was, before that association, the plant existed then. So did the plant exist without a consciousness? So it's easier in the form where we take the form. Now let's take the human births, right? The reincarnation process is very clear, right? The soul associates with the form a few weeks. I mean, all this even Baba has defined, right? At a particular time, the womb gets impregnated with the consciousness of the soul, and the soul becomes tied up with that particular embryo, and then goes on from there to till the body is stopped, right? In the subhuman forms, especially even I would say sub vegetable, metal and stone. I think it's a matter of thinking and conjecture. I'm not sure how it works. Does my question make sense?
Yeah, you are saying that each physical form, each tone should have its own consciousness
Yes, or
that
a
is
soul
evolved.
consciousness.
So yeah, I don't think it's like that. Suppose the stone
Okay.
breaks into two, so does it become
Mhm.
two? So I mean, I would think the consciousness are, it's like, it's like birds, if you can say, that they just pass on from one form to the other. It's not one to one. I would like to think it like that.
Hmm.
It's not one
That's
to one.
interesting.
Yeah. So
That's
maybe I'm
interesting.
wrong. I don't know. Difficult
So
to comprehend. Yeah.
in that sense, the Darwinian evolution is not uh, constant and continuous. It's a one-time exercise in the sense, I mean, Darwinian and even the evolution of form as per Baba is only one time in the sense that once the stone reaches the human form, let's say with Baba itself becoming the first God realized soul, after that, the physical evolution actually kind of stops because it's all there. It's just the consciousness of the soul moving through these kingdoms over and over again in the individualized souls, right? So yeah, I think
Yeah.
I kind of
I,
agree with what you're
I
saying.
would like to think that the all forms are created at once. And Darwinian theory doesn't apply because are the monkeys turning into humans still over
Not
over
anymore.
the
Yeah.
knowledge over the knowledge period that we have, like 2,000 or 4,000 years? I don't think so. There is no proof that it can be said that this guy was transformed. Suppose I do a recording for 150 years. Can I make it? Can I prove that the monkeys are transforming into humans? Though they are very close clones, but they are they are of their own species. That's what I would like to think. Some forms of human in the African regions, as we say, may be close, and the first there because of the Baba's theory, Baba's explanation could be close, but it's not that Darwin's theory is working still and forms are evolving in that fashion. I would like to think like that.
Yeah, scientifically, there may be evidence to
Yeah,
suggest that
yeah,
it is happening, but it's too minor,
yeah,
right? Too minor
yeah,
because it's also too slow. So, like you said, to do a lab experiment of evolution is very difficult because you need time, right? You need 100 years for the evolution to actually be perceptible, and 100 years, two scientists have changed hands already, right? So things like that. But very interesting discussion. But let's
You
think
know,
more.
every,
Yeah.
Karthik, every time the avatar comes, one of the jobs he does is to create new souls. So, what does it mean? Is he creating some drops at the drop level, or is he creating some humans? I would say probably he's creating some drop. And
Correct.
it's a continuous process. That's what I think, based on this information. What are the avatar duties? It is there, Avatar Meher Baba manifesting. Meher Baba manifesting Avatar of the Age. It is there in that book. So the new souls are created by the avatar every time he comes.
yeah, yeah.
So it's a
Ravi,
continuous process.
yeah, I would like to think that the most of the souls which are stuck in the lost form before human forms, that gets a push, and
Yeah.
also the souls which are closer to the coming to the cycle, that also gets a push. And
Yeah, yeah.
there are a lot of birth and death during avatars forms. If you see
Yeah.
the
Wars and
population growth during this last 150 years, and even the number of people dying in wars and famines or other the natural calamities is humongous actually. So that
Mangoes.
transformation, the big churning, like you run a mixer in a still, at home.
Yeah,
It's
it's
like
not, it's
yeah.
certainly not one-time process. It's a continuous process, I think.
During Avatar's presence, it gets accelerated. That's what I
No,
understand.
yeah, he gives a push to
Yes,
every soul, right?
yes, yes.
Every
Yeah, yeah.
individual soul, he gives a
creation,
push.
creation at large. It's creation at
Uh-huh.
large. He gives a push to creation at large. So it's all the souls in whatever stages of consciousness they all get a
Hmm.
push. And obviously,
Push,
the
right.
ones in the humans, a human's consciousness level, are the most lucky because they get the push directly to involution and beyond, depending on where they are. The others obviously get pushed up through the kingdoms, right?
See, Baba said one more thing. Evolution from animals to human, it happens in Africa. I don't know where he said this. I heard somebody saying this. Most of the Africa, that's what happens. And then in West, I would say Europe and America, the reincarnation happens in the human beings. When they go through a lot of uh, the what do you call that, the happy situations and suffering situations, go through a lot of reincarnations. When the soul matures, then the soul takes up life in the East. Again, he didn't mention India, or Pakistan, or anything. He just said
Yeah, yeah.
Africa, West, or East. That's all he said.
Yes, 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 yes.
So,
Agreed.
Jai
So
Baba,
let's,
I,
yeah,
I think that we have to understand that first of all, when we look in terms of space and time, then it becomes like a big thing, But see, technically, in the whole cosmos, there are billions of, galaxies, as we know. There are like supernovas going on all the time. Things are getting created, preserved, and dissolved every moment out in the cosmos. So, first of all these forms are just mediums. The only thing we have to focus on is that there is the drop soul, which has come out of the oversoul, which is unconscious of itself because it is having a game, that it doesn't know itself. So, how will it not know itself when it's not having full and complete consciousness or super consciousness? So, what we are seeing is it's basically the drop soul, which is by itself infinite, eternal, perfect. When it takes up consciousness, it is a very rudimentary consciousness. And these consciousness are taking the consciousness of the soul, individual soul, is taking all these different forms of media, right? And then stay in that particular form for God knows. If you're a mountain, if you're a human being, we know we live between 50 and 60 or whatever that is. So the whole process is there are so many forms in beams. Baba talks about how all these species are getting eliminated. Like we have the environmental aspects, then we have seen all the elephants and the saber-toothed lions and the dinosaurs dying. It doesn't matter. He says like these things have to happen because nothing happens to the soul, right? It's only the consciousness of the soul is taking all these different forms. And time doesn't matter because it doesn't exist anyway. It only exists in the waking state because this is also a dream, right? The waking state is a dream of part of the divine dream. So as long as we just focus on the consciousness of the soul and what happens to it, and looking at sanskaras, of course, that is a very important component. Then I think we are safe enough to understand this whole God speaks. Jai Baba.
What is
absolutely.
the point you are trying to get at? I'm sorry, I'm lost. I listened to your whole thing and I'm
Well, we
lost.
are
What you're
talking
trying to get
about, we are talking about, Baba said the pushing of the soul into this and that, all that, forms are forms, there are billions of forms and the soul. So I'm just saying that it's very simple. The consciousness is just going through evolution, right? What we call as spending sanskaras. And then when you come into the human form, you're winding sanskaras during evolution, then spending sanskaras during reincarnation, and then unwinding sanskaras. And thankfully, all of us are going veiled without having to go through all the different evolutionary process and hopefully get moksha. So that is the point. I mean, uh, I'm just saying that if you start getting too much into details about all these forms and this and that, then like the way the Western scientific, they are still struggling with all these aspects of consciousness and getting deeper and deeper into neural structures and this and that and all that stuff. So that's what I was trying to mean. Yeah, Baba.
Y- Yeah, right. And look who's talking. You're the one who gets deeper and deeper
Yeah.
into everything.
My goodness, Kama, you're the
It's
one.
just
Next time you give a
ironical.
big explanation. I'll tell you. Did you record this, Karthik? We will
Of
play the
course.
record to him again. Next time, be ready with that game. Jesus
Exactly.
Christ.
Exactly. Exactly.
Take it easy, Kama.
Yeah.
Take it easy. We all know that what you said, but
No,
you
but
you said in a
I think
very
you
go
you
ahead. Yeah,
brushed it away. Yeah, you brushed it away almost like we are the ones obsessed with detail and logic, and you are not. So that's the point me and Ravi are fighting. And yes, we will record and hold this uh, to you as a mirror, right? But
yeah,
I think the
yeah, yeah.
larger point I would say, which is applicable, is that's what probably Baba wants all of us to understand, and that's the logic of even saying that the heart should dominate, right? So our obsession is to try to understand the whence and the where and the how and the which and the we are so obsessed with it, which
Yeah.
is absolutely pointless at a level.
Yeah.
Anyway, but we'll
See,
we'll hold it
we are,
and fight with you, Kama. Don't. Yeah.
at the end of the day, Baba said it doesn't matter whether you read God Speaks or not. Hold on to my Daman, remember me wholeheartedly, surrender to
That's it.
me, or be obedient to me, love me. These are the things if we follow, have a goal of realizing me. If you have these, that's enough. And let's say I'm in the deathbed. If you come and ask me, hey Ravi, what did we discuss about this God Speaks in page 35? And why would I care? I would say, come on, get out, man. I'm dying here. Let me remember Baba. But now
Yeah.
we are not there yet. Okay. But we are mentally curious. Some people, God Speaks Baba gave for certain people. Baba said these words. People who have this mental, who wants to play gymnastics, mental gymnastics. That's for them. Baba gave the God Speaks. And that is what we are reading. Not one time, maybe 4 or 5 times we read this. And we are curious to know these small questions. We understand what you said. Yeah, ultimately, once we close this uh, session, we're going to be thinking Baba and loving Baba. Jai Baba.
Ravi,
Hey,
aren't
Baba.
we di- Ravi, aren't we dying every moment?
Sorry?
I said, aren't we all dying every moment?
Yeah, we're getting a new life every moment.
Right. So we have to remember every Baba every moment now, like, right.
That's right. By by talking about this, we are remembering Baba. Let's say we can pick up a
Yes.
Darwin's theory book and read it, right? But we don't care what he wrote. But we are reading God Speaks. Why is that? Because this reading reminds us remembering Him. That is the most important thing. I read God Speaks to remember Him. That's all. Jai Baba.
Jai Baba. Yeah. On that note, let's continue.
Thanks for your suggestion. We take it very seriously. Okay, Kamu.
No, no, no.
Yeah.
Life is a
Yeah.
joke.
Yeah.
Baba said only God Baba is serious, right? GBO, our inner force.
Okay. Let's continue. The point that is important and which is to be carefully noted is that as the cycle of evolution of consciousness of the soul rolls on, and further and greater consciousness is evolved through experiences of further and greater impressions, this evolution of consciousness inadvertently evolves a series of forms of higher and higher species while exhausting the impressions of the lower and lower species that get disassociated or dropped or shed. Thus, the gap between the beginning and the end of a series of species of one particular form, such as stone form, or metal form, or vegetable form, or other forms, beginning with the lowest or crude most first species of a form of particular kind, and ending with the highest or sublime most last species of form of that particular kind, is progressively filled in by the evolution of forms of higher and higher types suitable to the impressions and aiding the consciousness of the soul to gain higher and higher consciousness. In short, in between the most first and most last species of form of a particular form, there are diverse species of forms of that particular form evolved to suit the requirements of the evolving consciousness of the soul. Coming to the point, when the consciousness of the soul associates itself with the most last species of vegetable form, the conscious soul identifies itself with this most last species of vegetable form and experiences the impressions of the most last but one species of the vegetable form that was last shed. When all the impressions of this most last but one species of vegetable form are exhausted, the conscious soul no longer identifies itself with the most last species of vegetable form because the consciousness of the soul has disassociated itself from that most last species of vegetable form. This most last species of vegetable form is also eventually shed by the conscious soul after ages and cycles of experience of the whole vegetable kingdom through the gross world, on the earth, and in the waters. Although the most last species of vegetable form is shed by the conscious soul, and the soul is now without any form, yet the consciousness evolved is there. And through this consciousness, the soul, though without form, is conscious of the impressions of the most last species of the vegetable form just shed. These impressions must necessarily be spent or exhausted. In order to experience these impressions, the consciousness of the soul now associates with an appropriate medium to experience these impressions of the most last species of the vegetable form. Therefore, the consciousness of the soul thus tends the soul to identify itself with the most first species of the worm form. It must be remembered that this form of the most first species of worm form is nothing other than the consolidated mold of the impressions of the most last species of vegetable form. While the conscious soul thus identifies itself with this most first species of worm form, the soul realizes that it is actually a worm and becomes worm conscious. Despite all of the consciousness so far evolved, the soul is still not conscious of its reality, its original, infinite, eternal state, eternally in the oversoul. Although the soul is eternally in the oversoul and is infinite and without form, this partially conscious soul actually experiences itself as a worm in the gross world. This is ignorance. This ignorance persists as long as the consciousness of the soul is not fully evolved. But even when the soul has come to full consciousness, it is said to be enveloped by ignorance because this fully evolved consciousness does not make the soul biggest self-conscious instantaneously. On the contrary, when the consciousness of the soul is fully evolved, the soul begins to identify itself as a human being. So if I pause here, so you come up to the human being, your consciousness is fully developed, but at the first few births or first many births, you still have ignorance. And ignorance, I am reminded of Ashok's favorite analogy, or at least oft quoted analogy by Ashok of the mirror, right? So ignorance is nothing but the mirror analogy for the dust on the mirror, or ignorance, which is the uh, enveloping of dirt on the mirror, right? I will.
I have a question, Karthik.
Sure.
I
Sure.
think you
Oh,
mentioned earlier, sorry, I'm not looking in the book, but you mentioned in the reading, sanskaras must be spent or exhausted.
correct.
Is it the same thing, spent and exhausted, or it's different? And how do you
Spent.
spend? Can you
Yeah, go
just
ahead.
reconfirm the words were correct? Spent and exhausted? Just
Yes, yes, it was. It was somewhere here. Right? Let me search.
Okay, Baba, I think spent and exhausted will be both are different.
okay, so that's interesting. I would like to know what's the difference.
See, spent is just you're spending some colors. Exhausted are they become totally zero.
Okay.
Oh, but
I mean, in a particular form like this, the metal form, or what is that? You have before the metal form, the stone form. So there is a evolution, right? In the evolution, there is a dissolution of sanskaras, and there is a consciousness of the soul is getting developed. This is my understanding. Anybody else can
Very
add?
specific question. Please just answer my question. Rest off. I think it's okay. Spent and exhaust. Is it same, different? What is the difference?
It's different. Different. Spent and exhausted are different.
And exhaust is finished.
Yes.
Everybody same understanding? This sorry, I'm ignorant.
spent and exhausted. Yes, I agree with that. Which is basically that does not have any purpose, or it's basically what do you mean by something is spent? It does not have uh, utility anymore. And impressions have utility when they are carried on because they are not uh, spent. So I think spent and exhausted is the same.
And spending sanskaras. How do you
Mhm.
spend sanskaras? Let's say you had
Well, I think there is
gluttony.
a slight difference. There's a slight difference.
Okay,
This
go
is
ahead,
how I think
Ravi.
is different. Let's say I made potato curry. Okay,
Mhm.
so first time I made a potato curry, I create some impressions, and I stored it. My mind stores it, and next opportunity comes, my mind drives, hey, make potato curry. Hey, make potato curry. That's how it comes as a desire. Now, what is that I have to do is spend these potato making curries, right? Now, when I make the second time, I make the potato curries, I cannot exactly replicate how I did for the first time. There may be slight difference of putting a little bit more salt or less salt. Maybe I have used 6 potatoes. This time I'm using 4 potatoes. Like this, some variation. It's almost impossible for us to repeat exactly same. This is what Baba says. So the first experience of making potato, the impressions may not be spent completely. Partially it is spent. But that's what spending means. Exhausting means the whole potato connected, all the sanskaras connected with the potato curry making, they're all gone. If some perfect master takes them all, if they
Dissolve.
are
Means you don't want
obstructing,
Cut off.
you don't
yeah,
want potato curry anymore. You're sick of it.
anymore.
Done with it.
No more potato curry for you guys. That's it. No more
Thank you.
soup.
Thanks.
So I,
Thank
I
you.
I I don't agree with what Ravi said. So the first time you created the potato curry experience, right? That time you're not spending, you're just creating that at that time, is all I'm
Yeah,
saying. So so
yeah, you're
so you're
creating.
then modifying it, you're extending it and investing in it by creating potato curry multiple times again.
Yeah.
And like we all agree, when you get completely exhausted with potato curry, to use it in a sense of you're tired of it, that's when you're already
No,
spent
no,
or
no, 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 no.
exhausted.
Wait. Karthik, wait.
Okay,
So
go ahead.
you're making, you sometimes continue to make potato curry, right?
Yeah.
So 2 or 3 times you make potato curry, but you're also creating new potato curry sanskaras. New set of them are
Yes.
there.
Yes.
So all these old sets and old parts and all these combined together, potato basket. All the sanskaras are there. Potato bank that will be there. I
Coincide.
think exhaustion will be done when perfect master wipes out completely. Residuals won't
So
be there anymore.
so wipeout is done by perfect master
Yeah,
or
yeah.
Jay Baba, we can look up the dictionary meaning of both words. It'll make it easier.
No. You know what they
Yeah,
mean,
yeah.
right? Exhaustion and spending. You don't need. You can look it up. I don't discourage you, but that doesn't give
Yeah.
us any light
So
on this.
so in
It doesn't
spirituality,
give
we
us
have to
light.
erase the sanskaras. Okay, final erase is done by the perfect master, but on the way
Perfect master.
we have to keep trying to erase it.
Oh,
So
or well,
mhm,
in discourses, how can you get rid of the leftover sanskaras Baba gave? How to exhaust sanskaras, right? If you don't worry
mhm,
about potato curry, you never ate it, and you never made it, they get
correct.
weared off.
Yes,
They'll be dropped off. That way
that's
too,
right.
it can be exhausted.
Either don't think about potato anymore, or keep making
Hmm.
it until
Yeah,
you're sick of it, until you become a potato.
yeah. I mean, those are
Okay.
non-binding. I mean, for example, I took those are non-binding. But what we need to worry about is the binding sanskaras that are obstructing our loving Baba. That is the problem for us.
Yeah, I think does that answer your question, Sunil?
I think it does. Yeah, I'm done. Thank you.
Okay,
Jai Baba. Thank
great.
you,
Uh,
Ravi.
So
Jay,
I
Jay
I
Jay
Baba.
Bob,
think I think I think I would
Jay Bob.
say spend. Okay, go ahead, Kama, before we close the topic.
So what I've like, we are talking about two different things. One is when does the avatar, the perfect master removes his sanskaras in the sixth plane. So in discourses, it's discussed about organic sanskaras and inorganic sanskaras. So the organic natural sanskaras are the winding sanskaras coming from the womb right up to the last animal form till you take the human form. So those are organic natural sanskaras. And then once you become a human being, you are now spending sanskaras. All these sanskaras that you have accumulated through evolution are being spent now, and we are creating fresh new sanskaras in the reincarnation form. And then during the involution state, we know we call it unwinding sanskaras, where you don't react to our sanskaric impressions. So Baba has said that it is difficult but not impossible to work on your inorganic human sanskaras, but it's impossible to eradicate the organic natural sanskaras. So that is where I think the perfect master comes, and we need the perfect master to help us to get rid of those, the remnant sanskaras which are still there. So without the guidance of that, it can't happen. The other analogy I looked at it is like, when you look at a child, like the baby which grows up, it doesn't know anything, Starts with the alphabets, then it goes to kindergarten. Then we study all the different subjects: history, chemistry, science, maths, everything. And then we start to kind of, eliminate those things that we don't need to do, and we start specializing. So similarly, I think that's what's happening to, when we look at the analogy of the evolution part, we're taking all these different forms, and then once you come to the human form, you basically, with the grace of a perfect master, you understand that the only goal is liberation, mukti. So that part is very clear, that the whole purpose of creation is to go from unconscious divinity to conscious divinity. This is the ultimate purpose of creation. Yeah, Baba.
Right. So the other
One
phrase I was thinking
one
of
point.
that could help. Uh, Go ahead, Ravi.
No, one point I would like to comment on what Kama said was, um, as we pray to Baba, as we become detached from anything what we do, as we offer anything we do to the Baba, or if we do anything, we only do it to please Baba, not for our satisfaction. We are exhausting our existing sanskaras. These few points, what I said, will certainly help to wipe out sanskaras. And yes, it's almost impossible, but still it's possible for a human being to reach up to sixth plane. And Baba said one example is Arvind Ghosh, right? Arvind Ghosh able to reach sixth plane without any help of a guru. But that's very rare. Baba said it's almost impossible for anybody. Yeah, Jai Baba.
Great. Jai Baba. I think I looked at the time, so we can also stop at this point. The phrase I was thinking of for explaining spending or exhaustion is getting over. So to go back to the potato curry, you get over potato curry. That's it. You don't want to deal with potato curry anymore. Now, that's a rudimentary example. Replace that with things more relatable, like things that no longer motivate and are aspirational to you in your life, right? There are things like that. As a student, as a kid, as a young adult, you might have been excited about certain things which no longer excite you or motivate you, right? To go back to another oft-quoted example, which is Maslow, right? So when
Mm.
you reach a point where that no longer excites you, you've gotten over it, you spent it, you've moved on, right?
Yeah.
And in that
But
Mm.
it
sense,
happens, see, you normally we move on the other direction. If I make
hmm,
a potato curry not so good, I try to make it better and better and better with a lot of masala and make it very. And then after that, my hunger satisfied, and I want to go to chicken curry maybe.
exactly.
That's how
Exactly.
normally we
You
move
move on. So
actually.
it's replaced. It's always replaced. No, no,
So
that's
you get
absolutely correct. You,
indulgence level keeps on increasing actually. It's
yes,
not that so that's what is the trick.
the sophistication and the challenge and the complexity in your aspiration goes up. So you
Correct,
might
correct, correct.
aspire to get a cycle as a kid. Where we are today, you're looking at a luxury car. Same person, same soul, same body, right? But then you replace the cycle no longer motivates you, right? Oh yeah, cycle. So what, right? But so the exactly. So you replace potato curry.
Some more complicated angles to it.
Yeah, I mean,
Stirring
it's
the
not
pot,
just an
yes, in it.
example. Most importantly, we have to worry about our own weaknesses. Like, do I have greed? Do I have lust? Do I have anger? Do I have jealousy? All these things we have to worry about. Keep observing it, and they won't show up as long as I sit here. Nothing is happening. No, where's that simulation is there? I'm perfect. I think I'm perfect. But when the situation comes, I react, then only we know who I am. That is when we have to apply control, bringing in Baba here, offering Baba our feelings, everything. That is where it helps.
I agree with Rabiji. Yeah.
Yeah.
We honestly don't know whether our sanskars are gone or not, although we may not like potato curry. It's got to do with many more angles, which I think is probably not enough time to discuss. But yeah, you're right, Raviji. End of the day, surrender, try to become better and better human being. No lust, no greed, no anger, and so on. Yeah. Not easy though.
Okay. I thought, yes, I thought you had a comment or a question to further complicate things. Sunil?
I resisted asking.
Or you spent that samskara and let it pass. Yeah.
Let it pass. Let it pass. I try
Okay, no
myself.
problem. Let it pass. Okay. Okay, sure.
Yeah.
If it lingers, we'll
And I'll
talk
come
about
back.
it again. Yes, sure.
I hope
So
not.
thank you
I
so
hope not.
much for not as well. Such a full session again this morning. We had some interesting insights. We had interesting questions answered. As always, thank you so much for being part of this journey. Tar Meher Baba ki jai.
Jai.
Enjoy the week
Jai
ahead
Baba.
and sun. Yeah.
Tar Meher Baba ki
Jai Baba.
jai.
Jai Baba. Jai
Jai
Baba.
Baba.
Jai Baba.
Jai Baba.
Jai Baba.
Jai
Jai
Baba.
Baba.